Hello. It has been a minute. I kind of inadvertently took a month off in January. I think after December and all the Vlogmas stuff that I did and all the video content that I did, and just personal life and the holidays and everything going on, I was kind of burnt out. And my whole thing this year, especially with things I enjoy, I don't want to force myself to do them unless I'm enjoying them or I have the desire to do them. So I was just letting myself take the time. And I am back with a video. Hopefully, this will kind of get the ball moving and I will get back into my routine because I really do enjoy making videos. It's just getting started and having an idea. And what better way to start than to start with my January wrap up? So this month I didn't read a whole ton, but like I said, it's kind of going in my theme of taking my time and not forcing myself to read. I have so many other hobbies and I have a little toddler and other things going on. So if I don't have time to read as much as I did maybe last year, I'm not going to force myself to read if I want to do something else. So I read, I believe, 6 books. We will go through them. And it was an interesting reading month, to say the least. I read all kinds of books and I feel like I hit all ends of the spectrum, but let's get started. I'm going to try to start from beginning of the month to the end of the month. This month felt super long for me as well. I kept on thinking that it was the end of January and like we still had another week left, and I think this was a phenomenon for most everybody. January was just a long month. I'm kind of surprised I only got through like 6 books, but then again, I was reading 2 other books that I didn't finish at the end of the month that's going to carry over to February instead. So anyways, a lot of chatting, a lot of talking, but let's get into it. The first book I read this month was Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This one was really random for me. I wasn't planning on picking up this book. I have never really been interested in any Dolly Alderton books before, and this was my first one. I think it just kind of was perfect timing for me. I saw it on a lot of end of the year lists, and it seemed really polarizing, but when people were talking about it, they talked about the premise, and it's about a breakup from the male point of view. And I was kind of interested in reading that. So I borrowed it from the library, got it right away, and started reading it. And then it just kind of connected with me, and I just kept going, and I ended up finishing it. So if you haven't heard about this book, the basic premise is it's like an older couple. I think they're like 30s. I think that they imagine themselves to be married one day, and then they break up. And the whole book is from the perspective of the male partner, and he's basically the one that gets broken up with, and he's kind of just trying to navigate his new life being single, where all his friends are in relationships, and he's at the age where he thinks he should be in a relationship and settling down, and he feels like he's kind of starting over and also trying to navigate the heartbreak of his last relationship. So it's really interesting to read about. It just flowed really well. The banter and the conversations felt really realistic to me. And then at the end, you kind of have a little bit of a flip and you see a little bit of point of view from his ex's perspective, and it all kind of clicks and you're like, I get it. Like, you two are just not meant to be together. And I don't know. I enjoyed it. I know a lot of people that have read Dolly Alderton and enjoyed her before. From what I've observed, didn't really like this newest release from her, but I really enjoyed it. So I'm wondering if I go back and read some of those other books, if it'll have like the opposite effect of me and I won't like those. But that tends to happen a lot with me. I feel like I tend to like authors' lesser faves or less popular faves, and then the really popular ones I tend not to like as much. So I may read Dolly Alderton again, but there's nothing there that's like gripping me where I have to read right now. But if I come across her other books, I would definitely try them. And I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So that was kind of like a surprise book this month. The next books that I read this month, I was kind of just wanting easy, fun fairy tale. And last year I started this series. It is I think it's the Once Upon a Time series. I think that's what it's called. I read the second and third book. These are by Stephanie Garber. They are a YA romantasy. I enjoyed the first book last year. I think I gave it a 4 because I was pleasantly surprised. I'm not really a YA person and I'm not really a romantasy person. So maybe because it was YA, the cringy romance stuff wasn't in these like they are in the adult books, so maybe that played into me not being as icked out as I usually am. I was pleasantly surprised that I liked those books, so I ended up picking up the other two and I read them really quickly. They're really easy reads, very simple, very easy to follow. The issues that I had was, let's start with the second book. So this book I enjoyed. I didn't like it as much as the first book, but I thought it was a pretty good second book. And I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. I enjoyed myself. There was, kind of a lot of the similar things going on in the first one. There was some action scenes, some, yearning moments, and kind of still building out and learning about this world. So I enjoyed this one enough. I enjoyed this one enough. And then I went into the last book, which is Ballad of Never After. This book kind of let me down. I felt like there was so many plot holes in this book and so many things that were unanswered. And, when it's the final book in the series, you're really expecting everything to kind of come to close and to kind of get the answers and have everything kind of tied up. And I just felt like a lot of stuff wasn't really tied up or explained. A small example of this is the main character, or the main male character in this book, is constantly eating apples. Like throughout the whole series, in every moment, he always has an apple in his hand. It's this really big symbolic thing that you're trying to figure out, why is he always eating apples? And at the end, they don't really explain that to you and they don't tell you why. And you're like, I thought it was going to be some like tie into the lore of this character or there was a reason, but you're never told. And that was my issue with a lot of things in this book. So this one I ended up giving a 3. It was fine. Definitely the weakest of the 3, which is sad because I feel like sometimes the first and the last book are the strongest because the first book really brings you into the world and the last book really goes out with a bang and is very climactic and really gives you all the answers that you have been wanting, and this one just kind of fell flat for me. So anyways, I did enjoy this series though enough. I thought they were fun and they were easy reads and they were exactly what I was looking for at the time. The next book that I read this month was Martyr. So I've had this book since it was released last year. I think it came out last year around February. I had it pre-ordered. I got this on like release day and I had just read the premise of it and thought it sounded really interesting. I hadn't really heard much about it. And then as the year went on, I didn't pick it up. I didn't read it, but I saw other people reading it. And then at the end of the year, it was on so many people's favorite lists and so many publications' favorite lists or best fiction of the year. And I was like, why am I sleeping on this book? So I really made a point to read this month and I really enjoyed it. I get it. I get why people really enjoyed this book. If you haven't heard about this book, it is basically about the main character Cyrus, and he is an addict. He is dealing with addiction and it kind of stems a lot from his kind of coming of age, his growing up. He grows up being raised by his father as an immigrant to the US, and his mother is tragically killed in a terrorist attack. Her plane that she's flying on is shot down out of the sky. And so he kind of always grows up with these questions of like, why did that happen? Why are me and my father like not connecting? He thinks about all these different things and he's like, I'm going to write a book about martyrs and I want to talk to different people who have different definitions of being a martyr. And so he comes across this artist who is doing an art installation at a museum, and I guess this artist does kind of like live art. It's very much like Maria, what's her name? I'll put her photo and her name on the screen. She does kind of like live art installations where she is part of it and she has people come in and experience it. And so it's very much like that. This artist is dying of terminal cancer. She's decided to stop doing treatment and decides to sit in this museum and live in this museum as she dies, basically. And her installation is called Death Speaks, and people can come up and ask questions and have conversations with her. So Cyrus decides, hey, I'm going to go to New York and talk to this person. So him and his best friend go, and, things evolve out of these conversations. And yeah, you kind of have to read it to kind of see where it goes next. But it's really interesting. You can tell that this author is a poet. There's some really beautiful language and writing in here. Definitely one that I tabbed a bunch of different moments. I really enjoyed this one, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I was thinking about 5 stars, but it didn't resonate in the way that a 5-star usually does for me, where there's something there. I didn't quite have it with this, but I still really enjoyed it and thought it was a great book, and I understand why it was on a lot of people's favorites and why it was on a lot of best fiction lists of 2024. So, great book. If you're interested in it, definitely pick it up because it is worth picking up and reading. Part of my reading goals this year in 2025, it was mostly just to take my time with reading and slow down, not put such a big reading goal on over my head. And another goal, the only other goal that I really made for myself, was to try and read one of my favorite authors' backlists. So I saw somebody doing this on TikTok or YouTube. Basically, they pick an author every year and they try to read their whole catalog. And obviously, I mean, depending on how ambitious you are, you can pick an author that has a really big catalog, medium catalog, small catalog, whatever you want to do. So I kind of thought that was a fun idea, and I thought about an author that I would choose, and there's so many authors like Octavia Butler, and you have like James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, like classic modern writers. But I ended up picking Ann Patchett because she's one of the authors that I've read the most of her books, and she's one of the authors that I have a lot of her books on my shelves that I haven't read. So I was like, let me do Ann Patchett this year. So prior to this year, I've already read Dutch House, Tom Lake, These Precious Days. Okay, yeah, those are the 3 books that I read from her. So Tom Lake, Dutch House, and These Precious Days. And all of those have been 4 stars or above. So I really enjoy Ann Patchett. And so I decided to pick up one of the books that I've been really wanting to read for a long time that I've had on my shelf, and that is Bel Canto. This, I think, is one of her first publications when she was kind of like a younger writer. I think this was maybe like her second, third book that she published. And I was really excited about this book because the premise sounds really interesting, and it is the winner of the PEN/Faulkner Award at the time. It is basically about this big lavish birthday party happening in South America, and there's this famous opera singer that is performing, and there's all these different politicians and important people at this party, and this terrorist group comes in and takes the whole party hostage. And it's basically the aftermath of that, or not the aftermath, but like the whole hostage situation of that and the characters and kind of what unfolds from there. So from that premise, it sounds really high stakes and really exciting and really fun. And I think because I had that expectation going in, that really kind of tarnished this for me, because it wasn't really that. To me, it was more of kind of like a character examination, and much slower, and was really focusing on the different characters' relationships. And usually I really like that, but for some reason in this book, the characters didn't really connect with me, and I felt there was some kind of disconnect or detachment, and I couldn't really get behind or really feel for any of the characters, and I thought some of it was pretty unrealistic. So unfortunately, this one let me down, and this was the first Ann Patchett that let me down of all of the books that I've read from her. And of course, it's the first one that I picked up this year, so not a great start, but I have faith that it will get better, and this was kind of just a fluke. When I looked up reviews for this book, it seemed to be a little bit polarizing. Some people really enjoyed it, and it really just worked for them, and then some people it didn't, and I obviously fell on the side that didn't. But yeah, I think it was just came up to expectation of me thinking this was going to be a really high stakes drama. And that's just not what it was. It was pretty slow, and frankly for me, pretty boring. It just didn't really work for me. I don't know. Just something didn't connect. And so unfortunately, I only gave this one a 2-star. It took me a really long time to finish as well. I ended up having to move it over into audiobook because it was dragging so much, and I just could not get myself to pick it up and read it. So I would listen to it while I was cooking or doing other things to finish it. And the audiobook wasn't great either, so that didn't help. It was like the type of audiobook narrator that does like voices, or like does deep voices for men, and I just didn't love that. So anyways, just all around not a great experience. So hopefully my next one is better, because this Anne Patchett reading goal did not kick off well this year so far. And then lastly, I picked up Onyx Storm. I have been on the Fourth Wing train with everybody since Fourth Wing came out. I actually surprisingly enjoyed Fourth Wing. I think I gave it 4 stars. I'm not the audience for this. I'm not a romantasy girly. So the reason I picked the Fourth Wing when it became popular was because my best friend was reading it at the time, and we love to kind of read books and talk about it together. It's just so fun to buddy read. And it was so popular that I had to pick it up and read it. And it is like a really fun, entertaining read. And then Iron Flame came out a few months later after I had finished Fourth Wing, and I read that on release. And it was kind of a letdown. Wasn't as good as the first one, and was kind of frustrating in a lot of ways, but I still enjoyed it. And so, I'm committed to the series experience. So then I picked up Onyx Storm on release, and there's nothing I can really say as critique that hasn't already been said. I really agree with a lot of people that didn't love this book. Wasn't written well. Like, we'll be frank, I'm not sure Rebecca Yarros is the best writer. I don't know how her non-fantasy books read, but her fantasy books are not great. She does come up with, or at least creates, fun worlds and stories, but they're not told in the best way. And she's one of those writers where I feel like has so much potential, and it just kind of always falls a little short, and it could be so much better. This book was really confusing. I understand I didn't reread the other 2 books going into this, and there was some time in between, but even people that reread the book say the same thing. And I did read summaries and watch videos going into this as like a refresher, so I wasn't completely blank when I picked up this book, but it just wasn't written well. You're really confused the first 50 pages, I'll say. And then there's so many people, and I would say like supporting characters. Like, they're not even like around the main characters. They're either farther out, and you're supposed to remember them and know who they are. And there's so many names. And then there's the dragon names. All the dragons have different names, and they're connected to different people. And all the dynamics and relationships between everybody, it's just really confusing to follow. There's a lot of areas in this world and locations, and those have really weird names, and so you're confused with the names of the places, the people. Some of the characters go by the place that they're from, which is often done, just for an example, like the Duke of Cambridge. He's also known as Cambridge, but he also goes by his given name, but she doesn't tell you that in the book. So that was the issue I had. If she had told you that was kind of the thing, and kind of, been consistent with that, I think that would have helped. But also, too, she would sometimes use the last names of characters. So you're like, can you just use one name for the character? There's already 50 other characters. I cannot follow 50 characters and all of their 3 or 4 different names that they go by. So the confusion factor in the writing just throw you off. And then this definitely felt like a lot of side quests that didn't really make a big difference in the plot of this book. And I read a little bit about it online, and I guess this series was supposed to be a trilogy when she plotted it out. And then after the first book came out and it was really popular, the publisher changed it to a 5-book series. So you could definitely tell, like, she just maybe doesn't have enough story, and there's a lot of added stuff in here to kind of just drag it along. I understand this being the 3rd book in a 5-book series, there's not going to be a lot of answers, and it is kind of a, middle of the series type book, but it is really apparent in this that she didn't have it planned out to extend that long. So there's a lot of plot going on in here that isn't that important and did not really go into the main plot. So very confusing, very weird cliffhanger, I will say as well. I think I ended up giving this 2.5 stars. It really saves it every time because it is, in general, a pretty entertaining book, but it's just not done as well as it could be, and that's what's so frustrating with it. So anyways, I will continue to read this series because I don't think the next book comes out till like 2027 or 2028. So will be plenty of time for me to wrap my head around reading another book in this series, and I'm already invested where I kind of have to see where it goes. But it was fine. It really let me down, and I think that was kind of the common consensus among most people who read this book. That was the 6 books that I read this month. I enjoyed some and really did not enjoy some of them. Right now, I am reading a nonfiction called They Can't Kill Us Till They Kill Us. It's Hanif Abdurraqib. He writes a lot of really cool, like, essay poetic collections. So I'm reading the one about his kind of growing up and music and reflecting on that. And then I'm also reading by Chris Whitaker, the same author of All the Colors in the Dark, and this is the book before that called It Ends With, or oh boy, We Begin at the End. Sorry, I I had It Ends With Us on the brain because that's been all over the news lately, and it's really been fun to follow. But the book is called It Begins With Us, or no, it's not called that. It's called We Begin at the End. So anyways, I am finishing that book up. I'll probably finish that today, but those books will count towards February since we are in February now. I thank you so much for being here, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe if you want to and you enjoy my content, and leave a comment with your favorite book that you read this January, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.